Hey there, Anthony Pietrobono here, online fitness coach and fitness author. Today I want to talk about exactly how you can simplify your muscle gain to allow you to gain the most amount of lean muscle tissue without gaining body fat. When it comes to building muscle, a lot of us just overcomplicate things, and that does more harm than good for the most part. So we need to figure out what exact things that we should be focusing our attention on and what things we actually should not even be worrying as much about. So when it comes to building muscle, there's really four main things we want to focus on in terms of our training. The first one is going to be focusing on structuring in progressive overload. So whenever we have a specific training program, or even if we don't have a training program, we want to make sure that we're doing more work the following week than we did in the prior weeks. That's what the definition of progressive overload is. This is where you're doing more total work, I'm talking about reps, sets, and weight, than you did in the previous weeks. A great example of progressive overload is essentially where you're bench pressing 4 sets of 8 reps at 135 pounds on all 4 sets. And now this week, you're gonna bump up your weight by 5 pounds. So now you're gonna do the same 4 sets of 8 reps, but you're using 140 pounds instead of 135 pounds. So you're doing 5 pounds more on each set with each repetition. That's more total work than you did in the previous weeks. Another example is if you kept the weight the same and you just added in a rep, then you could end up doing 9 reps of the 135 pounds instead of 8 reps across all 4 sets. And let's even talk about that on a very minor scale. Let's say just one of those 4 sets, you did 9 reps and the rest you did 8 reps of the 135. Well, you just did 1 more rep than you did last week. That's 1 more rep of total work, right? So that's what I'm talking about when I talk about total work. We want to be progressive overloading as often as we can. Obviously, there's a lot of the times where you can't just increase by 5 pounds every single week or increase by 1 rep on the same weight every single week. You can do things where you add in another set. So you could do 5 sets at 8 reps and just rest longer. That's another way of progressive overloading because you're doing more total work. So you see the theme here. Total work is the accumulation of reps times set times weight. You can manipulate those variables to get more total volume throughout the week. And that's going to bring us to the second thing we're going to want to make sure that we're doing. Make sure you're having enough total training volume each week on every muscle group that you're training. Now, as natural athletes, total volume is a really fine line. You don't want to actually cross that line because you can be overtraining. And when you are overtraining, you might not realize it. So that's another key thing you don't want to realize. If you're someone who really pushes the limits and just loves to suffer and really feel the pain and feel exhausted by the end of your workout, then you're going to have to make sure that you're not actually overtraining. And you want to have your total volume spread out evenly across the full week. So that's going to lead us into the third thing that we need to actually structure, and that's our total training frequency on each of the muscle groups. When I talk about training frequency, I'll talk about how often are you actually stimulating that muscle. So if we're talking about working the biceps and we're doing bicep curls, then we might actually want to spread it across 2 or 3 workouts in the week. Now, research has totally shown that 2 workouts a week on the given muscle work that you're trying to train is superior in every case to training a muscle group just once a week. So we want to be stimulating muscle protein synthesis at least twice a week on each muscle group. And how do we do this? We give it the stimulus of actually training the given muscle. So you want to make sure that you can balance out your training frequency with your total volume for the week. And this is really independent from person to person. This totally varies on a large scale depending on a variety of factors. Your genetics is the number 1 role. Number 2 role in that is your training experience, or how long you've been in the gym on a consistent basis. Obviously, someone who's been training for 10 years, 5 days a week is going to be able to handle a lot more than someone who's only been training for 1 year. But not always, because of the fact of genetics. The genetic aspect is really superior than others. Even if you're taking steroids, there's a lot of people who are natural who can actually handle more volume each week than people who are actually taking steroids. So the number 1 factor on how much volume you can handle and how frequently you can train that muscle is largely dependent on your genetics. Then it's dependent on whether or not you're natural, and then it depends on your training experience. So those are the 3 main factors that's going to be determining how much volume you can actually handle. So you got to figure that out for yourself. But as a general rule of thumb, Mike Israetel has come out with a lot of recoverable volumes and a lot of guidelines that you can actually use. And for the most part, for most muscle groups, it's anywhere from 7 to 14 sets if you're a beginner each week, and up to double that if you're advanced. So 7 to 14 sets, that could literally mean you're just doing 3 exercises at 3 sets once a week. Or you could do 2 exercises, 3 sets, twice per week. 2 exercises, 3 sets, twice per week. So 2 bicep movements, 3 sets of each one. Have that in 2 sessions throughout the week, and that could be your enough training volume for your biceps. Now, if you're an advanced trainee, you could double that. So you could do 4 exercises at 3 sets twice per week on every given muscle group. And of course, if we dive deeper into this, if you want to bring up a lacking muscle group, you might want to increase the volume of it and taper back the volume of your other muscle groups so that way you can really push it and grow that muscle faster. That's just a pro tip that I'm throwing in there to go ahead and bring up a lacking muscle group. So we got progressive overload, we got total training volume, and then frequency. You want to have these set in place. You want to balance out the frequency and the total volume. And then the fourth thing that you want to focus on is actually focus on your exercise execution. This is totally crucial that you're actually fully lengthening and fully contracting and shortening the muscle throughout the entire range of motion on most of your exercises, unless you're advanced and you want to throw in some partial rep training. But for the most part, if you want to be maximally stimulating your muscles, you want to make sure you can work it through the entire range of motion. So exercise execution is key. As an example of how you can make sure your exercise execution is on point, you want to use the general rule that you'll want to lock down the surrounding joints that are not supposed to be moving, and you want to immobilize the joint that you're trying to work the muscle that runs across it. Now that sounds confusing for most people, but what I'm essentially saying is that if you're trying to work the tricep, then you want to, in most cases, if you're isolating the tricep, you want to keep the shoulder locked in place, and you're going to only be bending at the elbow joint. So you want to come up all the way and then extend all the way. So that's how you're working the tricep muscle. So if you're doing any rope extensions, keep the shoulders down back, keep everything locked in place. Elbows are locked in place, and you're only going to be moving at this elbow joint. That's the only movement that you'll want to see. Same thing with other movements. If we're working the quad and we're doing a leg extension, you want to make sure your hips are locked down. You want to make sure that everything is contracting so that way you can lock all of your joints down so you're only moving it. You're only hinging at the knee joint. That's an example of perfect exercise execution. It's locking down the surrounding joints that shouldn't be moving so that way you can focus on the muscle that is running across the joint that you're trying to work. When you're trying to work a specific muscle group, you want to lock down the surrounding joints and only let the movement come from the joint that is supposed to be moving during that range of motion for that muscle group. All right, so now we know what we truly need to focus on in terms of our training to build the most amount of lean muscle tissue. Progressive overload. Managing your total volume throughout the week. Make sure you're doing enough, but not too much. And then also making sure that your frequency is at least twice per week, maybe even 3 times per week for muscle groups you're trying to bring up. You don't want to really have much training where you're only hitting the muscle group once a week because your body can actually recover within 72 hours. So why not hit it again with another stimulus? Exercise execution is arguably one of the most important here because we need to make sure our form is on point, so we're actually stimulating the muscle to its full capability. And now we're going to dive into the 3 things we need to focus on in terms of our nutrition to actually allow us to make sure we're not gaining too much body fat while we're gaining the muscle and allow us to gain the most amount of lean muscle tissue. All right, so the first one is calories. We need to make sure that we actually have enough total calories throughout every single day to support muscle growth. If we're in a caloric deficit and you're trying to build muscle, chances are you're not gonna build muscle. You could build some, especially if you're a beginner or you don't have a very optimized nutrition for the most part. I've seen people who have been training for 7 years but didn't really structure their nutrition in a very good way, and they started just managing their calories, and they could be in a slight deficit, and just by having enough protein, they're actually able to recomp by gaining muscle and losing some body fat. So it's definitely not rare. I've seen it plenty of times, but for someone who's more advanced, then you need to make sure you're in a caloric surplus to gain enough muscle. After you have your calories set, or you know you're in a caloric surplus, you really want to make sure you have enough protein. When we're talking about enough protein, I'm talking about having at least 1 gram per pound of body weight. So if you weigh 180 pounds, then try consuming 180 grams of protein, right? These are just a general guideline that you can use, but it's definitely a good and proven guideline, proved upon by Eric proved by Eric Helm's research on contest prep with natural bodybuilders. This actually proved to retain the most muscle when in a contest prep phase. So if it's going to retain the most muscle, it's going to allow us to build the most muscle. So have protein at 1 gram per pound of body weight. Make sure you're in a caloric surplus where you're consuming more calories than your body needs, but make sure this caloric surplus is slight. Only want to be 100 to 300 calories above your caloric maintenance to make sure that you're not gaining too much body fat. Unless you don't care about gaining body fat, then go ahead and increase by 600 to 800 calories. After that, the third thing we're going to worry about, guys, the last thing you really want to worry about is meal timing. That's the third one, meal timing. Focus on your nutrient timing, having all of those carbs in the pre, intra, and post-workout setting if you can handle it. If not, you can have most of them in the pre, intra, and post, and then you can have some of them sprinkled out in other areas, in other meals. Now, just by focusing on these 3 basic things for nutrition, you're going to be well off on your way to gain the most amount of muscle and the least amount of body fat. And that's really what we all want to do, right? We want to have the most muscle, least amount of body fat. And that's how you do it, guys. Don't worry about things like food composition. You know, is an apple better than a banana? Is a granola bar better than a protein bar? A lot of us are just worrying about the wrong things, and when it comes to gaining muscle or losing body fat, we just need to focus on the small amount of things that are going to have the biggest impact on our results, because we can get burnt out and actually worry about the wrong things and cause us to really not get the results that we deserve to get. So really focus on being in the caloric surplus, a small surplus. Make sure you're having 1 gram per pound of body weight with your protein every single day. And then you want to structure your nutrition so that way you're really taking advantage of meal timing. You want to have all those carbs in the pre, intra, and post-workout setting when your body's going to be most insulin sensitive, so that we can actually process those carbs and store them in glycogen rather than fat cells. And you're going to be optimizing your gym performance by having those carbs in that area. And when we're optimizing our gym performance, that means we're going to perform better. If we're performing better, then that means we're going to be making sure that we're able to progressive overload better and handle more total training volume, recovering enough to have a greater frequency, and that's going to be allowing us to just feed into each other and gain more muscle, right? So you see how training and nutrition are completely tied. Don't focus more on one or the other. They are both as essential, training and nutrition. Structure them both. Make sure your training and nutrition are complementing one another. Just take advantage of these 4 things with your training and these 3 things with your nutrition. Notice how there is nothing for supplements here. Nothing for supplements here. They're not going to do nearly as much as advertised. So just take advantage of structuring those 4 things for training, 3 things for nutrition. So if you have any questions, shoot me a message. And I actually have a full muscle building secrets guide. It's a free muscle building secrets guide teaching you exactly how much you need to consume for yourself personally to gain the most amount of lean muscle tissue. It has a whole bunch of secrets as well that are going to be elaborating on these points. It goes into these points in much more detail. So it's a free guide. You can just download it. It's an ebook. And just click the link in my description. You'll get it sent to your email. And I'll talk to you guys later, right? So subscribe for more vlogs and more bodybuilding content. And I'll see you in the next video. Don't forget to give it a thumbs up if you really enjoyed the video. If you found some value from this and you really appreciate it. You know, I get most of my traction from your engagement. So if you guys are engaging, you're really liking the content, just give a comment or give it a thumbs up. And if there's any topics you'd like me to speak about to actually help you with your fat loss or muscle gain, specifically, like specific topics, just comment below and I'll see you in the next video.